The champagne glass trembled in my hand as my father's booming laughter echoed across the wedding reception hall. His voice carried over the gentle clinking of silverware and murmured conversations, drawing curious glances from nearby tables. "She couldn't hack military life," he declared to anyone within earshot, gesturing toward me with his own glass. "My daughter thought she could be a soldier, but she washed out in basic training. Came crawling back home with her tail between her legs." Heat flooded my cheeks as conversations around us died. I felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon me, measuring, judging. My younger brother Marcus shifted uncomfortably beside me. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. His dress uniform impeccable as always. This was his wedding day, his moment to shine as the golden child who'd made it through officer candidate school while I'd supposedly failed. But that wasn't the truth, not even close. The groom, Marcus's best friend from the academy, Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, caught my eye across the room. Something flickered in his expression, a moment of recognition that made my pulse quicken. He raised his glass in what appeared to be a toast, but his eyes held mine with an intensity that spoke of shared secrets. He knew. He knew exactly why I'd really left the military. 6 months earlier, the morning sun blazed mercilessly across the training grounds at Fort Benning as I pushed through my final set of push-ups. Sweat dripped onto the red Georgia clay beneath me, but I didn't break form. I couldn't. Not when Staff Sergeant Morrison was watching with those cold, calculating eyes that had haunted my dreams for weeks. "Rodriguez, you think those are push-ups? My grandmother could do better, and she's been dead for 10 years. I gritted my teeth and kept going. 28, 29, 30. Around me, my fellow trainees struggled through their own sets, but I was holding my own. I'd always been strong, stronger than most of the men in my unit, if I was being honest. Years of competitive athletics had prepared me for this moment. That was the problem. "Time," Morrison barked. "Fall in." We scrambled to our feet, forming perfect lines as he drilled into us over the past 3 months. Basic training was almost over. Just 2 weeks left, and then I'd finally achieve my lifelong dream of serving my country. "Listen up, maggots." Morrison prowled in front of our formation like a predator. "Most of you sorry excuses for soldiers will graduate. Some of you might even make it in the real army. But some of you." His eyes found mine. "Some of you don't belong here." My stomach clenched, but I kept my expression neutral. This wasn't new. Morrison had been targeting me since week 2, when I'd outperformed half the male recruits during combat training. At first I'd thought it was just his way of pushing me to be better. Now I knew better. After dismissal, I was gathering my gear when Morrison appeared beside me. "Rodriguez, my office, now." His office was a cramped space that reeked of cheap coffee and cigarettes. Morrison settled behind his desk, but didn't invite me to sit. I stood at attention, waiting. "You know why you're here," he said finally. "No, Staff Sergeant." His laugh was harsh. "Cut the act. You've been a problem since day one. Too aggressive, too masculine. The other female recruits are complaining that you make them uncomfortable in the barracks." That was a lie. I got along fine with the other women. If anything, some of them looked up to me because I could keep up with the men. "I don't understand, Staff Sergeant." "Let me be clear." He leaned forward. "The Army doesn't need women like you. You're disrupting unit cohesion, creating problems." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "With respect, Staff Sergeant, my performance evaluations... Your performance evaluations are irrelevant if I determine you're psychologically unfit for service." The threat hung in the air between us. "I can make this easy, or I can make this very hard. Your choice." I stared at him, finally understanding. This wasn't about my performance or my attitude. This was about his own insecurity, his own prejudices. He couldn't handle that a woman might be better at this than the men under his command. What do you want? Drop out. Voluntary withdrawal. Medical reasons. Let's say anxiety disorder. No one gets hurt. No one asks questions. You go home with your dignity intact. And if I refuse? His smile was predatory. Then I'll make sure you're discharged for psychological unfitness. Good luck explaining that to future employers. Or family. I thought of my father's reaction when I'd enlisted. His barely concealed disappointment that his daughter wanted to be a soldier instead of finding a nice husband like my cousins. His constant comparisons to Marcus, who could do no wrong. I need time to think. You have 24 hours. That night, I called the only person I thought might understand Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, Marcus's friend from the academy. He'd always been kind to me, treated me like an equal instead of just someone's little sister. When I was younger, I'd harbored a secret crush on him, but he'd been dating someone then, and by the time they broke up, I was already committed to military service. Sarah? What's wrong? His voice was warm, concerned, and suddenly, I was spilling everything. The harassment, the threats, the impossible choice I faced. Jesus, he breathed when I finished. Sarah, you can't let him get away with this. What choice do I have? If I fight it and lose, I'll be labeled as psychologically unfit. That follows you forever. Then don't fight it through official channels. Document everything. Record conversations if you can. Build a case. For what? He's not stupid enough to put this in writing. There was a long pause. I might know someone who can help. Give me a few days. 3 days later. My hope died. Harrison called back with the news I'd been dreading. I'm sorry, Sarah. I talked to some people, but Morrison's got protection. His commanding officer is his brother-in-law. They're not going to act on this without ironclad proof. That night, I lay in my bunk and made the hardest decision of my life. I couldn't win this fight. Not here. Not now. But that didn't mean I was giving up forever. The next morning, I walked into Morrison's office and signed the voluntary withdrawal papers. Present day. The memory burned in my chest as I watched my father continue his performance for the wedding guests. He'd been telling this story for months, each time growing more elaborate in his description of my supposed failures. The military's no place for girls anyway, he was saying, now, to a captivated audience. They should stick to nursing or teaching. Leave the real work to the men. I caught Harrison's eye again. This time, he nodded slightly, a signal we'd arranged months ago when I'd finally told him my plan. It was time. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. The sound cut through my father's monologue, and gradually, the room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. Dad, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the reception hall. I think there's been a misunderstanding. He frowned, clearly annoyed at the interruption. Sarah, sit down. I'm telling a story. Yes, you are. But it's not a true story, is it? The silence in the room grew thick with tension. Marcus shot me a warning, look. But I ignored him. I didn't wash out of basic training, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. I was forced to withdraw by a corrupt drill sergeant who couldn't handle having a woman outperform his male recruits. My father's face flushed red. Sarah, that's enough. No, it's not enough. For 6 months, you've been telling everyone who'll listen that I'm a failure, that I couldn't hack it. But the truth is, I was excelling. I was in the top 5% of my class in every category. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila folder I'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for this moment. Physical fitness scores, marksmanship rankings, leadership evaluations, all documented proof that I was succeeding, not failing. Harrison stood up from his table, his dress uniform commanding immediate respect from the room full of military families. Ladies and gentlemen, he said formally, I can confirm Miss Rodriguez's account. I was involved in reviewing her case when she approached me for help. Staff Sergeant Morrison had a documented history of targeting female recruits. He was forcing Sarah to choose between her integrity and her career. My father's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "But that's not all," I said, my voice cutting through the whispers. "Dad, do you want to tell everyone why you were so eager to believe I'd failed? Why you never once asked me what really happened?" His eyes darted around the room, seeking escape that wouldn't come. "Because you never wanted me to succeed in the first place. You wanted me to fail so you could say women don't belong in the military. So Marcus could remain your perfect golden child, while I stayed home and played the dutiful daughter you've always wanted." "Sarah, please." My mother's voice was soft, pleading. "No, Mom. I'm done protecting his ego." I turned back to my father. "You've spent months humiliating me publicly, never once considering that there might be more to the story. You chose to believe I was weak rather than asking if I might have been wronged." The room was deadly quiet now. Even the catering staff had stopped what they were doing to listen. Harrison stepped forward again. "There's something else you all should know. After Sarah contacted me about her situation, I made some calls. Staff Sergeant Morrison is currently under investigation for the systematic harassment of female recruits." Stories. A collective gasp went through the room. "Furthermore," he continued, "Sarah didn't just walk away from her military dreams. She's been working with a legal advocacy group to build cases against discriminatory practices in the military. Her failure, as some have characterized it, has actually become the foundation for helping other women who faced similar situations." I felt tears threaten, but held them back. This was my moment, and I wouldn't let emotion undermine it. "The real truth," I said, looking directly at my father, "is that I chose my principles over my personal ambitions. I could have stayed silent, could have let Morrison destroy other women's careers to protect my own. Instead, I sacrificed my immediate goals to do what was right." My father's face had gone from red to ashen. Around the room, I could see people's expressions changing from curiosity to respect, and in some cases, to disgust as they looked at my father. Marcus finally found his voice. "Sarah. I had no idea." "That's because you never asked. None of you did. It was easier to believe I was weak than to consider I might have been brave." Harrison raised his glass again, and this time his intention was unmistakable. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to propose a toast. To Sarah Rodriguez, a true soldier who chose honor over personal advancement. The kind of person we need more of, both in and out of uniform." One by one, the guests stood and raised their glasses. My mother was crying openly now, whether from pride or shame, I couldn't tell. Marcus stood slowly, his face full of newfound respect, and perhaps a touch of guilt. My father remained seated, isolated in his humiliation. "To Sarah," the room echoed. As glasses clinked around me, I felt a weight I'd been carrying for months finally lift from my shoulders. The truth was out. My reputation was restored, and my father's public humiliation was complete. But as I looked at his defeated figure slumped in his chair, I felt something unexpected, not satisfaction, but sadness. This moment of triumph felt hollow because it meant the complete breakdown of a relationship I'd once cherished. Later that evening, the reception was winding down when my father finally approached me. Most of the guests had left, and I was helping my mother gather gift cards from the head table. "Sarah." His voice was quiet, stripped of its usual bombast. I turned to face him, bracing myself for anger or recriminations. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes, genuine shame. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "A big one." I waited, not trusting myself to speak. "I was wrong. About everything. About you, about why you left the military, about the kind of person you are." He ran a hand through his graying hair. "I think I was so invested in the idea that Marcus was the successful child, that I couldn't handle the possibility that you might be just as strong, just as capable. Dad, let me finish. Please." His voice cracked slightly. When you enlisted, I was terrified. Not because I thought you'd fail, but because I thought you might succeed. And if you succeeded at something I'd always told myself women couldn't do, well, what did that say about all my other beliefs? I felt my anger beginning to soften, despite myself. So, when you came home, when you said it hadn't worked out, part of me was relieved. It confirmed what I wanted to believe. I never bothered to ask for details because I didn't want to hear them. He looked around the nearly empty reception hall, at the few remaining family members who were studiously avoiding looking in our direction. I made you pay for my own insecurities, and then I made it worse by broadcasting my version of events to everyone who'd listen. I turned you into a cautionary tale to make myself feel better. Tears were running freely down my face now. The thing is, he continued, what you did tonight. Standing up to me in front of everyone, exposing the truth even though it was painful, that took more courage than anything I've ever done. You are exactly the kind of soldier, the kind of person this country needs. I stepped forward and, despite everything, hugged him. He held me tight, and I could feel him shaking. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. I know, Dad. I know. When we finally separated, he looked at me with something approaching awe. What happens now? With the legal case, I mean. I wiped my eyes. Morrison's hearing is next month. My testimony is part of the evidence. And there's a new bill being introduced in Congress to strengthen protections for service members who report harassment. I've been asked to testify at the hearings. His eyes widened. You're going to testify before Congress? Assuming the bill makes it to committee. Yes. He shook his head in amazement. My daughter, testifying before Congress. And here I was telling everyone you were a failure. Dad, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this for revenge or to prove a point. I'm doing it because other women are still facing what I faced. If my experience can help change the system, then everything I went through will have been worth it. He nodded slowly. That's exactly what someone with real integrity would do. Harrison appeared at my elbow, having apparently been watching our conversation from a respectful distance. Sarah, I hate to interrupt, but I wanted to let you know I got a call this afternoon. Senator Williams wants to meet with you next week about the testimony. She thinks your case could be the key to getting the bill passed. My father extended his hand to Harrison. Colonel, I owe you an apology as well. Thank you for supporting my daughter when her own family wouldn't. Harrison shook his hand firmly. No apology necessary, sir. Sarah's been fighting this battle on her own. I just helped make sure her voice was heard. As the three of us stood there, I realized that this moment, painful as it had been, was actually a beginning, not an ending. The truth was out, relationships were being repaired, and my real mission was just starting. 3 months later, I stood in the marble hallway outside the Senate committee room, reviewing my notes one final time. My testimony was scheduled to begin in 10 minutes, and I could hear the murmur of voices from inside as senators took their seats. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Watching on C-SPAN. Dad made everyone at his office stop working to watch too. He's so proud he can't shut up about it. Go get him, sis. Another text. This one from Harrison. Morrison was just sentenced to 6 months in military prison and dismissal from service. Your testimony at his court-martial made the difference. Thank you for your courage. A final text from my mother. Your father is in the front row of the gallery. He wanted to be here to support you. We love you. I smiled, tucking the phone away as a staff member approached. Miss Rodriguez? They're ready for you. As I walked into the committee room, I caught sight of my father in the gallery, just as my mother had said. He was wearing his best suit and sitting ramrod straight, his eyes bright with pride. When he saw me, he nodded, once a gesture of respect and encouragement. Senator Williams, the committee chairwoman, called for order. The committee will now hear testimony from Miss Sarah Rodriguez regarding her experiences with harassment in military training and her recommendations for the proposed Armed Forces Accountability Act. I took my place at the witness table, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the room full of senators, reporters, and observers. This was my moment, not for revenge, not for personal vindication, but for real change. Chairwoman Williams, distinguished members of the committee, I began, my voice strong and clear. My name is Sarah Rodriguez, and I'm here today not as a victim, but as someone who chose to turn a personal injustice into a force for positive change. As I launched into my prepared remarks, I felt a deep sense of purpose settle over me. The humiliation at my brother's wedding, the confrontation with my father, the painful process of rebuilding our relationship, it had all led to this moment. I was finally the soldier I'd always dreamed of being, just not in the way I'd originally envisioned. Instead of serving in uniform, I was serving by fighting for the rights of those who did wear the uniform. It was a different kind of battle, but no less important. And for the first time in months, I felt truly proud of the path I'd chosen. The truth, as painful as it had been to reveal, really had set me free, and hopefully, it would do the same for countless other service members in the future. As I concluded my testimony to a room full of nodding senators, I caught my father's eye in the gallery. He was wiping away tears, his face glowing with unmistakable pride. The little girl who had once craved his approval no longer needed it, but having it, finally, for the right reasons, made the victory that much sweeter.